The new UK-EU deal. Too much red tape?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. Finally, a new era has begun for the United Kingdom after it had completed the formal separation from the European Union.
Yep.
Hurrah, says everyone, including Clergyman Pete.
Yes.
Well, this has implications on all of the arrangements, which includes travel, trade, immigration, and security, and many other things that we will discuss on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But many people also believe that the idea behind the New Deal was to have a frictionless trade. Mm-hmm. But no, it seems as though there's more administration, more costs, more red tape. What does this actually mean for the United Kingdom and for Europe, and in fact, maybe even other countries who want to now deal with this whole region? Well, here's a little thought. By tying yourself up in too much red tape, business trading could soon get into a scrape. Even if you untangle and finally escape, your competitive edge will be all out of shape. Yes, Clergyman Pete, I suggest that maybe all of this red tape could be a problem. Maybe the new business should be about learning to be an escapologist. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the red tape is the problem. As soon as you have a very complicated deal, what you're allowing for, or there is a problem that this will creep in, is people cheating the system, people getting around the system, people being confused by the system, and ends up falling down around your ears. So there's that problem. Too much red tape, too much paperwork, too much need for compliance for small business. It's too much cost for small businesses. This is my point. For big businesses, maybe they could swallow it. For small business, I think that's going to be difficult. But I think that there is a problem with red tape, which I guess you as a businessman will be interested in terms of trade. But the thing about having too much red tape is also, I think, an aims or values issue rather, and that is getting rid of the excess red tape is part of why we left the EU. It shouldn't be like that anymore. And so even though all we're talking about is the arrangement with the EU, it's putting constraints on trading outside of the EU arrangements, such that you could say, look, that why we left was to take back control and to get rid of the annoying, niggling regulations, personified by having to have straight bananas and the problems with the wine lake and the butter mountain. They're all stupid things about regulations in the EU. That was a big reason why people voted to leave, and there's loads of red tape this bill. In this treaty, sorry.
Well, indeed, yes. Well, look, let's quickly analyse some of the things that are going to affect everybody. So let's start with the business. You're right about small, medium, and large-sized companies being affected in different ways. Mm-hmm. I think that, having said that, in my opinion, I think it affects everybody, and I'll explain why. Yeah. The idea of the deal originally was that there would be no taxes on each other's goods and they could cross borders, no limits on the amount of things that could be traded, essentially creating like a frictionless scheme. However, the problem here is that when we look at companies who are based in mainland Europe wanting to trade with the United Kingdom, i.e. traders in England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, we'll touch upon that in a bit, particularly when it comes to the borders with Northern Ireland and Ireland. But what it has done, sadly, is it's meant a lot more paperwork, a lot more red tape, which in turn means a lot more time, a lot more resources, and cost. Yeah. Now, here's an example. So, for example, if you have products including plants, live animals, food products, you need to have special licenses and certificates.
Yep.
Yes. So what that means now is that you as a business have to be set up to not only comply, so whether you are at the point of source to be able to ensure that you have the right certification, to meet the right standards, to meet the regulations, to also meet the border controls, to have the right people who can understand all the certifications and the documentations. Mm-hmm. This goes through the entire supply chain. that's something which I see as a barrier to business. Now, what this will mean, I think, for UK companies, if we take that angle, is that I think probably I'm going to say smaller to medium-sized businesses will probably find that actually they're going to lose out. And we're already seeing some business leaders in that particular size of organizations concerned that actually some of their contracts will be cut, or at least delayed, or potentially they may actually have to reduce business because their customers in mainland Europe are thinking, hold on, we don't want all that paperwork. We don't want all that burden. We don't want to put more layers of bureaucracy on top of our trade, and they'll go for different suppliers. And so what that will mean in the short term, so certainly looking through 2021, possibly 2022, I think what we'll see is that some businesses may have to weather the storm if they can, accepting that small businesses as well as large have been hit badly by COVID-19. We still have to cope with the virus. And I think that what we will see is some businesses just simply won't be able to trade with Europe in the same way. Which means that what they've now got to do is think about things in a different way. Maybe your business opportunities do not lie in Europe. They may lie in Asia, or they may lie in America or somewhere else. So for me, that's the obvious thing is, this is really one of the things that I was hoping wasn't going to happen when we think about what seems like, hundreds of years ago when we first decided to come out of Europe, and we finally are out. But really, the whole idea was to have free arrangements, less bureaucracy. And unfortunately, I do feel that it's going to stifle business in the short term.
Yes, yeah, I think that, well, this is it. It's going to have a stifling effect at the very point when that's the last thing we need. I mean, just looking at the situation that we're in, that is in the midst of an over-the-top, ludicrous reaction to a pandemic that we all know about, and there's been lots of people complaining about. But that's not the point. However which we complain, we still have those problems of a weakened business and a weakened economy. And what we need is the opportunity to grow and grow quickly.
I was going to
need flexibility.
If you were in Scotland or in England or Wales, I might be slightly sceptical here because I alluded to this at the beginning, which is that Northern Ireland becomes an exception. Why is that, folks, for our international listeners who've have been studying the detail? But essentially, the idea was to create an invisible border because Northern Ireland, of course, attached to the top of Ireland. And Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, remains in the EU. Now, essentially, the free-flowing goods there, Northern Ireland will continue to follow the EU's rules, meaning that lorries can continue to travel across the border without having to be inspected. Now, there are some exceptions, because certain products like meat, fish and eggs, etc., will need to be checked to comply with the EU standards. However, so that's good, but my thought would be that, is that really fair?
I think
we are the United Kingdom. What's happened? So, of course, as part of the deal, what we're seeing here is that we're actually seeing that. And I understand the political backgrounds with obviously what we see in Ireland, because physically it's not part of the land mass of England, Wales and Scotland. But nevertheless, there is a difference. I think it's good that we've got to that point, because that was a big sticking point to the other thing that you mentioned, which is fisheries. Well, of course, when we sort of think about fish, they don't tend to sort of sign up to the agreements and certifications. They just swim about. And of course, it's interesting that the fishing situation was apparently one of those big blocks in the sense that it was one of those things they couldn't agree on. And yet, from an economic perspective, the fisheries only really contributes a very small amount to the economy. But it's not just about the economy, is it? It's about safeguarding borders and our shoreline.
Well, the thing is, it's not just about the economy and the level that the fisheries contribute to our economy now. the point is, we're talking about an historic wrong that the EU fisheries were a major part of the British economy, and time again you have commentators saying, well, there's no real point in it, the fisheries don't really contribute that much. No, they don't now, because of the fact that the rights to fishing were given away during the negotiations over the EU years ago. And so what we're talking about is a reclaiming the waters such that our fishing industry can be built up again. And there is also the cultural side, which is very, very important. So many communities which have been decimated, riven with poverty because they're based around fishing. And they just don't have the volumes of fish that make it viable in today's world. So, yeah, that's a real problem. Now, supposedly, there's a renegotiation in a few years' time in 2026, I think. And so that would mean that at that stage we can, in theory, stop the EU boats coming in. But it would be part of a new negotiation, basically, at that point. That's good. But it shouldn't. We shouldn't even be getting to that stage. I mean, there are other things that are good. There's a method of fishing, in which you send electric pulses through the water and just kill all the fish and then scoop them up. This is, of course, terrible for the stocks of fish, and it can only be done by big, expensive ships which have that. So it's a competitive advantage of people who are prepared to be cruel. Now, Britain has a couple of these. I think England does, and Scotland has one. So it's interesting that now, in English waters anyway, it's not going to be allowed, even if you're EU. So that's been stopped. Not in Scottish waters, so that doesn't affect that region. As I say, I believe they only have one ship doing it, so it's not that big of an issue. But no, just sorry I said waters there. I didn't mean that. I mean the Scottish fleet. The Scottish ships aren't affected. The waters are affected, but not the Scottish fleet. So the Scottish people could go around electrocuting all the fish to their heart's content. But that's good. That's a movement in the right direction. That will gradually... That has come into place. That's in place now, rather. That's
I'd like to point out there is a slightly worrying area here for UK businesses, and that's about the use of skills, which come in different forms. And as we know that, let's take the agricultural industry, many farmers, British farmers, have used foreign labour. And this tends to be seasonal, but not always. Now, the worrying thing here is it's based now on a point system. What does points mean? Yes, prizes, folks. Unfortunately, it's a bad prize, because what it means is for those people now wanting to work in the United Kingdom, those people want to move here to live or to study will have to pay a visa. Essentially, it's a form of tax. And it runs into hundreds of pounds. It will cost £348 to apply for a student visa from outside, and £475 to extend or switch from inside the UK. Now, a skilled worker, it will cost between £610 and £1,408 per person. Now, what is deemed to be a skilled person? We started with the agricultural side, which is those people who perhaps farm the land, who pick the berries and the strawberries and many other areas where it supports farmers. This actually has worked very well as a system before. Putting that levy on people, I think, is going to put a lot of people off. And that means that somewhere down the line, one or two things are going to happen. Either we can't get the skills, or that cost will be borne by the farmer, and it has to be passed on to the customer. Now, something has to give. So I'm slightly concerned about that levy. The other thing then is that when we come to a slightly more skilled labour, and that's all relative term, I know, but let's think about those who are in health. So health workers, for example. So those will have to pay a health surcharge of £624 per person per year, unless they are health care workers themselves. So if you think about when people do come to this country, unless they're actually a healthcare worker, and let's say they work in some other form of industry, there's lots of things that they're going to have to now pay. So it's not that attractive at the moment. And so somewhere down the line, something's got to give. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm all for having a fair system, but it's not, dare I say, it's not frictionless. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of burden to your pocket.
There's certainly a lot of friction. And this problem of having this complex deal, of having it worked out, where you have really, I would say, not good faith on both sides, means that this is my personal opinion. You can weigh in here, Mark. I believe that this was a mistake. Yeah. I know the difficulties of having no deal, of going of operating under World Trade Organization rules, but I think that was the only option that was ever, in the end, going to result in a good deal. Yes, it would have been very difficult. Yes, there would have been problems with the Northern Irish border, but at least we would have been negotiating from a position of strength. And so if we'd have left 6 months, a year down the line, we could have been negotiating and come up with a good deal for Britain. Not such a good deal for the EU, but we're negotiating for Britain. And I think that's the key thing that you've got to bear in mind. To me, and I think to the British government, it doesn't really matter if the whole EU project fails. It's not down to us. Not anymore. We left. We've got to negotiate for Britain. Let them look after their own and look after their own problems. So I do think this whole thing is misguided. I've been reading commentaries saying that this negotiation has been very quick. It's just been in 9 months. What do you mean been in 9 months? The vote was in 2016. Oh, yeah. Come on, keep up. It's
remember those years.
It's just remarkable that people appear to think that the negotiations have only been done in the last minute. But the reason for that is that they have, I think. The signs are that is what's been happening. There's been huge changes and movements in the last few months, which you would have thought they could have sorted out a long time ago. In fact, we should have left a long time ago. This is now the worst time. And I just remind people, Mark, that when we were just before the vote to leave, we predicted there would be a vote to leave. We looked at it and thought, but this is a terrible time for it to happen. We should not be having the referendum there. But now this is an even worse time to actually finish the transition period. I mean, transitioning, as many people will know, is never easy, depending on what you're transitioning to and from. But this, you want a good environment in which to do it. This is a terrible economic environment made worse by the the COVID problem. COVID and Brexit put together did not make it. Yes, exactly.
Well, now, here's a thought, closure opinion. I know that obviously, as much as you love the United Kingdom, any aspirations that you may have had to move to the EU or retire have suddenly gone out of the window. Why? Because not only that, the movement the other way, so for example, for UK citizens like yourself, going to live, work and potentially retire has changed. So what this now means that, for example, if you were wanting to now go and retire, you would need a visa if you were going to go there for any reason other than tourism. Yeah. And even then, there are key things that you now need to consider, particularly for insurance and travel, etc. So what it means now is that you could have to then be means tested. You could be in a situation where you may have to apply for citizenship. And that in itself is something to consider. So I can see you being a French citizen, and I know that's something that would be dear to your heart. Which, if you're considering that, do let us know. Send us a postcard. But here's the thing: we had a lot of movement. There are a lot of British people who are retired in France and Spain and many other countries around Europe, and so of course this is going to cause them an awful lot of problems. So I would want to ask you there about your thoughts. Surely, if you've got a willing neighbour, this deal should have at least given a little bit more accommodation to those who were already in Europe, living there, UK citizens, or conversely, the other way around, EU citizens who were perhaps living in the United Kingdom. We've not made it easy for their lives.
No. I mean, and I think this is the issue. I said before about it wasn't done in good faith. If we just take it as a whole, including those difficulties for citizens abroad that you just mentioned, I think what we can describe or characterise this agreement between the UK and the EU as a charter for rejoining. I mean, it's exactly the sort of thing you would come to if you were thinking, look, we want to actually join. You want us to join you. We make it such that people, find it difficult to move back. As you say, there were difficulties. There's difficulties with trade. There's difficulty with renegotiating things to do with fisheries. There's a problem with the border between the EU, between Britain and Northern Ireland. Wouldn't it be so much easier if you were back in the EU? We'll make changes so you could just see. This is the first step.
Well, you heard it here, folks.
I hope I'm wrong, but
Yes.
Of course I'm not.
Well, there is one, and we're coming to the end of the show, but there was one thing that I would like to point out, and this is regarding security. So one of the things that has now meant that obviously with the United Kingdom moving out of the EU is access to data and certain security systems. And this is something that has concerned both parties, incidentally, because it's a collaborative process. United Kingdom provides a lot of good information to the EU and vice versa. And yet now we're not going to be in a situation where we can share the same data. Now, if we're going to be willing partners and collaborators going forward, to me, this is something that has to be resolved. Whatever the deal is today, whether it be on goods, as important as it is, to me, in a time when we've seen cybercrime increase, and without necessarily pointing the finger at any given country, we've seen that certain nations have accelerated their cybercrime, particularly to the United Kingdom as well as Europe. And to me, this is a golden opportunity where they could have perhaps put things in place which would have made it a lot easier to share data. Now, there is obviously data sovereignty is very, very important, both at a national level and an individual level. But to me, that should have been one of the top priorities to at least secure that freedom of access in the right way for the right people, i.e. Political bodies that are certified, know what they're doing, and can provide information where it matters. And I think that it will be interesting to hear what our listeners think about that alone, let alone some of the other arrangements. So overall, listeners, what do you think about this new arrangement? Are you actually even pleased that potentially, as Clergyman Peters alluded to, this could mean that actually the United Kingdom is sort of out but not quite, and maybe is paving the way for another initiative to get back into Europe? Maybe you've got another thought on the matter. Why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts? Well, I think that this subject is going to rumble for some time, and let's see whether we do manage to find better ways of tightening up the deal and making modifications. We want free trade. We want to be part of a United Kingdom that can deal with anybody. So join us next time for more topical topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.